In this video, I want to talk a bit about arrays. Now, arrays are a special variable type that is actually more of a list than it is a single value. They're very easy to create. We're going to talk about how to create them here in just a few minutes, but I want to get a few rules down about arrays before we move in. So we've got probably one of the most important things is that all entries or all elements within an array must be of the same type. And the reason for that is that an array is really just a single variable that has a bunch of pieces of information in it. An easy way to think of an array is like a series of mailboxes. So we could just draw out some really quick boxes here, and I'll try to keep this simple. And we'd have to give this array a type, and we already talked a bit about variable types in an earlier video. So let's say this was a string array. And it could have names in it. So we could have like Bob and Tom and Bill and Cat and I don't even know. So Zach, because I have to be in there somewhere, and Reggie, because because it's Reggie. So all of these must be of the same type. These would all have to be strings. It's not like you could remove Zach and have an object value in there. Like you couldn't stick some blueprint in there. It would have to be actually a string value. Now, so they must all be of the same type. Next rule is that arrays are dynamic. What that means is you can't set any locked number of boxes or entries into your list. That can change during gameplay. So right now I have 6 names in my string array, but there's nothing saying that during gameplay I couldn't add another box if I wanted to and put another name in there. There's also nothing saying that I absolutely cannot remove an entry and have one fewer box. So the number of entries within an array is not a locked thing, so that makes them dynamic. Also, arrays have index values, and that's kind of like a way for the computer to know what entry in the array you're talking to. Now these are 0 based, which is important to keep in mind. So in an array like this, we'd have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you asked the array, hey, what's in entry 3, you'd get Cat in this case. So those are some rules to keep in mind about arrays. Now let's talk about how we create them. So I'm going to jump over to Unreal. And I've got a very simple actor blueprint here that I'm going to create an array within. So let's go ahead and click on the New Variable button because, again, an array is just a type of variable. So create that, and let's give this a name. We'll call this myStringArray. And I'll set the variable type over to string, and it's really this button right here at the very end that looks like a little colored grid line. That is going to determine whether this is an array or not. So when you see the little grid there, that means it is an array. If we compile this, we can take a look down at the default values, and we can start adding elements to the array. So there you can see it has 0 elements at the moment. So we can hit the plus button and add one. So let's do some names again. We'll do something totally unique that you've never heard of before, and in no way is meant to represent anything you've ever heard of. And we'll add another one. All right, so we have Cambot, Gypsy, Tom Servo, and Crow. Again, 4 totally unique names you've probably never heard of in your life. So what I'm going to do now is bring my array into the graph. And I just want to show you a few things about working with arrays. Because again, this is not a single value. This is a list of multiple values. That means a lot of the functionality and a lot of the things that you typically do to single values will not work on an array unless you know how to work with them. So we're going to talk briefly about that. I'm going to do something a little bit hacky here. I'm going to jump over to my defaults, make sure that auto receive input is set to player 0, just so that I can press buttons and make stuff happen. Let's right click and I'll tap F, and we'll make some things happen when I press the F key. So let's drag out a wire into space, and I'll type log, and that's going to create a print string. Now this is a string array, so off the top of your head you might be thinking I should be able to just plug this in, but the answer is no, because the system has no idea which entry in the list you actually want to print out. If you wanted to print everything, then you would need to run a loop on this array. Looping is something that I'd like to talk about separately, so we're going to keep things fairly simple for now. I'm going to drag a wire off into space. And if you take a look under Utilities, and then under Array, you'll see that we have a for each loop and a for each loop with break. Again, looping is something we're going to handle a little bit separately. So jump under Variables, Default, and there's the entry for your actual array. And then we can also call some functions. So if you go under Call Function, expand Utilities, there's some array functions here. And this is where you can really start to work with your arrays and make changes to them. So the tooltips are going to help you understand what each one of these things does for the array. So you have things like add, append array, which would, again, add an entire array to the end of your existing array. Some things that are probably really important for you to know would be like add and get. So that will actually get a value from the array. There's also last index versus length. We'll talk about that a little bit more once we get into looping. But a lot of folks want to know how many entries are in their array. That would be length. If you want to know the index value for the last entry in your array, that would be last index. So if you've played with looping before, perhaps in code or in scripting, you would understand why you might actually want to use last index, because it keeps you having to do length minus 1 when you're trying to perform a loop. If you don't get that, don't worry. That's something we'll talk about separately. Now, I do want to mention, you'll see that the little F's for function are color-coded in this case. That has to do with pure versus impure functions. So a green function is going to be pure, a blue one is going to be impure. All that means is that a green function is not actually going to affect the array, while a blue one or an impure one really will. So let's keep this simple. We're going to grab a get. And I want to unplug this for just a second to show you something. Notice that this node is completely gray. It's not grayed out. It's not like it's just not going to work for you. The color coding on it disappears because this is actually a wildcard value. Now you'll only see these really for the most part within arrays. You can see there's the tooltip says array wildcard. What that means is this is waiting for whatever type you plug into it, and then it's going to work with that type. Really quickly, I'm going to add a new variable, and we'll call it my int array. And I'll set its variable type over to integer, and we'll just drag that into the scene really quick. Let's connect this up, and you'll notice that my node turned that teal color. So again, this is just waiting for whatever type you plug into it. Now let's plug in a value between 0 and 3. Again, we have 4 entries in our array right now, so let's set that to 3, and we'll plug that into print string, compile, and we have a copy of the blueprint in the level, so I'll go ahead and hit play, and if we hit F, there you go. You can see we are printing out Crow at the very end. Now, that's about as far as I want to take things in this lesson. Just keep in mind that at any point you can drag out a wire, and if you take a look under Call Function, Utilities, Array, you'll see all the different things you can do to an array. I guess one other thing I could mention is there are several functions that you will perform that will output arrays, and it's important to know that. So as a really fast kind of way to wrap that up, let me bring in several static meshes. So here's a static mesh, and we'll make a duplicate of that and a duplicate of that, and then let's grab all 3 of these guys, and we'll make even more duplicates. So we've got a total of 6. Now, meanwhile, back over here in our graph, let's nuke this stuff out. We don't really need it. And I'm going to right-click, and let's say, actually, let's do get all actors of class. So we're going to say get all actors of class, and what class are we looking for? Let's do static mesh actor. And notice the output of this get all actors of class is an array. So that's important to know, because right now if we wanted to do anything to that array, we'd have to get something out of it. So we could say get, and we could get something, say at index 3, and now we have access to whatever mesh was in the 3rd index there. I will also point this out very, very briefly before we go. When you have lists of actors like this, or actor arrays, you have a certain degree of functionality that you can perform on a for each basis. So if we take a look, actually let's go under our functions. So you can see call function for each, and there's several different things we can do. For example, if we go under utilities and orientation, we could say take the actor's local rotation, And notice that was listed under for each. That wasn't just listed under functions. Let me drag that out again so you can see that just to make sure. So you have call function, and you have a call function for each. And let's just take our delta rotation. I'm going to drag backwards and say random rotator, like so. And just to show you what this is going to do, I'm going to compile. Let's also make sure that here in our scene, before I try anything, that I set all of the mobility of these actors over to mobile or movable instead of static. And now when I play, if I hit F, you see they all get random rotation. That's because you're performing that function for each. Not all things you might want to do, not all functions have a for each version, but I do want to point that out, that that is available on certain outputs. So that's all I want to talk about in this lesson over arrays. Thank you very much.